Now, when we click on the color picker modal, we want to be able to choose a color and then hit Save Colors to create a new option within our color panel for the colors of our app. So within the color panel component, we'll bring in the segment component. We want to use this to wrap both of our labels and slider pickers for primary color and secondary color within our modal content area. And on each of these segments we'll set a prop of inverted so you can see the text of the label. And then within our state we'll add a couple of properties, one called primary and set to a string, and one of secondary. So we want to use an onChange handler for both of these slider pickers, and our first onChange will be set equal to a function handleChangePrimary, and the second will reference handleChangeSecondary. So we'll first create handleChangePrimary, and instead of passing through an event, we have access to the color itself. So we have this color object, and it has a hex property on it, where you can get the hex code of the color that we selected with the primary color picker. And we can modify handleChangePrimary to handleChangeSecondary to use the hex property of color to update the secondary color and state as well. So once we save that, we will open our React DevTools. We'll go to our color panel component, and when we pull up the state and we select a color for primary and secondary, we can see that they're updated in our state object, but the slider isn't moving to the part of the picker that we're selecting. This is because we're not passing the values from primary and secondary in state back down to our slider picker components. So we need to make both of our slider pickers controlled components by passing primary and secondary down to the color prop on our respective slider pickers. So now when we do that, save our file and try updating the colors in our state again. We'll bring up the color panel, open the modal. We can now change the area of the slider that we're selecting and the hex code that's attached to the primary and secondary values in state. We could also set primary and secondary to initial values, since we're making these controlled components, and display by default a certain part of the slider picker, for example the green and purple colors like we have selected here. And upon saving our colors by clicking on the Save Colors button, we want to create a colors property for our currently authenticated user, which will contain an array of unique IDs, and on them will be information about the colors that we chose: the primary color with its corresponding hex code and the secondary color with its hex code. So colors will be a new property on our user object within our users collection. And to implement this, we'll head back to our color panel and we'll add an on-click to our Save Colors button, referencing a handle save colors function which we'll create. So handle save colors will first have a little bit of validation to make sure that we have values for both the primary color and the secondary color in state. So we'll say if this.state.primary and this.state.secondary, and to set up this validation we'll remove the colors, the hex codes that we had previously set for primary and secondary. And if we have values for both primary and secondary, we'll execute a function called Save Colors, and we can pass the primary value and secondary value to Save Colors, and we'll call them primary and secondary. And we want to reach out to Firebase, and in particular we want to use the users ref to select a particular user. So we'll need to import Firebase, And then using the user's ref, we want to add a child with the current user ID. So we need to add a user property in state, referencing this.props.currentUser, and then pass our current user data down to our color panel. So we'll do that in app.js. And once again, we'll provide a key, and we'll provide a somewhat unique identifier with currentUser.name. You'll notice that we already use currentUser.uid for the side panel. However, we're sharing the same key value for meta panel and messages, so we'll change the key value to currentChannel.name for the meta panel. We want each of our components to have a different key value so we don't have any problems with passing down props or with rendering each of the components. Now we can reference the colors property for our user. We'll push a unique identifier onto this new property, and we'll use the update method to push an object with both the primary and secondary colors, which we're getting from the parameters of saveColors. And then within the then statement, we're going to log colors added. If that's successful, we're going to close the modal and then catch any errors with catch, where we'll just use a console error. So now once we save that and test out saving our first set of colors, we'll open the modal and pick a couple of colors, a couple of particular shades of a given color. We'll hit Save Colors, and looks like we're getting an error. We're trying to provide a path of object / colors within our save colors function. So this needs to be this.state.user.uid / colors. So now let's try this again. We'll pick another set of colors. Then we'll hit save. If we take a look at our log, we see that the colors were added, our modal was closed, and now for our currently authenticated user, we have a colors property with a unique ID and the colors that we chose saved as keys primary and secondary.